The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the rights of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the School District of the Chatham's Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted in the board administrative offices, sent to the clerks of both Chatham Borough and Chatham Township, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the Independent Press. If you'd all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It will now be my pleasure to swear in the three newly elected board candidates. First would be Ann Ciccarelli from Chatham Borough. Please, Ann, please repeat after me. I,
Ann Ciccarelli,
do solemnly swear that I support the Constitution of the United States
that I support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same
and allegiance to the same
and to the governments established in the United States and this state under the authority of the people. So help me God.
So help me God.
I,
Ann Ciccarelli,
do solemnly swear that I possess the qualifications prescribed by law for the office of member of the Board of Education. I am not disqualified as a voter pursuant to RS 19:4-1.
19:4-1.
And that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of that office according to the best of my ability. So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations and
Thank you.
welcome to the Board of Education.
Good job, man. Thanks. Thank you.
And now I'd like to swear in the oath of the two re-elected candidates for Chatham Township.
And other duties as assigned.
I'm going to do the I, and then whenever I say I, it's state,
Yeah.
What? You can go first. Yo, do you want the Bible or you don't want the Bible? We'll do it together. Please raise your right hand. I
Lotta Kenny, Michelle Clark,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I support the Constitution of the United States
that I support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey,
that I will bear true faith
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same
and allegiance to the same
and to the governments
and to the governments
established in the United States and this state
established in the United States and this state
under the authority of the people. So help me God.
So help me God.
I
Lotta Kenny, I, Michelle Clark,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I possess the qualifications
that I possess the qualifications
prescribed by law
prescribed by law
for the office of member
for the office of member
of a Board of Education,
of a Board of Education,
am not disqualified as a voter
and am not disqualified as a voter
pursuant to RS
pursuant to RS
19:4-1,
19:4-1,
that I will faithfully,
that I will faithfully,
impartially,
and
justly perform all the duties of that office
all the duties of that office
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Lotta. Congratulations, Michelle. Now I'll do roll call. Ms. Ciccarelli?
Here.
Ms. Clark?
Here.
Mr. Connors?
Here.
Ms. Cronin?
Here.
Mr. Franz?
Here.
Mr. Gilfillan? Ms. Kenny?
Here.
Mr. Nonamaker?
Here.
Ms. Weber?
Here.
9 members are present and accounted for. I just want to announce, obviously, the election results that, obviously, Ann Ciccarelli and Mrs. Clark and Ms. Kenny all won their board member seats. Question 1, the budget passed by a 66 to 34% majority, and therefore, $58,767,459 will be raised from the school year from both the borough and the township. Question number 2 for the $24.8 million referendum was defeated by a 68 to 32% majority. At this point, I'll entertain nominations for board president.
I would like to nominate Jill Weber, please.
I'll second the motion.
Any other nominations?
Any at all.
Roll call vote for Ms. Weber for president. Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cronin?
Yes.
Mr. Franz?
Absolutely.
Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Nonamaker?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
That vote passes 9-0. I gladly pass you the gavel and the zonation.
That's why you're so loud.
Thank you, Peter. Excellent job. That was power. We were all thinking about stepping out on you during that 10 minutes that you were in charge, but John was left. John said, no. No. Just a matter of housekeeping, Mr. DeQuilla, we know, I do not have to read. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Tom.
No, we are already in session.
Rookie move.
We'll just go right down from the president and into the vice president, and then into the reorg motions, and then when we get through C, D, and E of the reorg, then we'll go right into the regular meeting. You don't have to do the open public meeting act.
Okay, very good. Although there is no spot on the agenda for President's opening remarks.
It comes after the reorg. If you want to do it before, that's fine too. Whatever you want to do, we'll ad lib for the president.
Okay, very good. The other two? Okay. Very good. I'd like to make a motion to accept nominations for Vice President of the Board.
Yes, at this time, I would like to nominate Matt Gilfillan as Vice President of the Board of Education of the Chathams.
Second.
I'll third. Any other nominations? Discussions? Moving right along.
Vote for vice president. Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cronin?
Yes.
Mr. Franz?
Yes.
Mr. Gilfillan?
Did he go from something?
You have to?
Wish.
Say yes.
I'll abstain.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Nonamaker?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Passes 801 with Mr. Gilfillan as vice president. Congratulations.
Thank you. And then, Peter, can I just continue right through the rest of the reorg agenda?
Please.
Okay, very good. So I'd like to move action items C1 through C18 on the reorg. They're titled annual appointments.
I'll second the motion.
Any dramatical changes this year?
No.
Is there any additional discussion, or does anybody want to take a few more minutes? I know Kim scoured her stuff over the weekend because she was shooting questions out. Okay. Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind?
Agenda items on the reorg for annual appointments, C1 through C18. Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Ms. Cronin.
Yes.
Mr. Franz.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
Mr. Nonamaker.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
The annual appointments pass 9-0.
Thank you. Moving on to page 6, annual motions and designations. I'd like to move action items D1 through D31.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Nonamaker.
Second driver.
Although I could use some training in item number 2, parliamentary procedures. My tutor, Mr. Belding, is in the audience. Are there additional discussions for D1 through D31? Oh, seeing none, Mr. DeQuilla?
Agenda items on the reorg annual motions and designations, D1 through D31. Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Mr. Clark. Ms. Clark, sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Ms. Cronin.
Yes.
Mr. Franz.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
Mr. Nonamaker.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Agenda items pass 9-0.
Thank you. I'd also like to pass a motion for the standing committees, E1 on page 17 of the reorg packet.
And I'll second that motion.
Thank you. It was in the folder as well as I handed it out in a nicer chart.
It is also on the addendum for anybody else paying attention.
Okay, very good. On the addendum, thank you. I would like to just make a comment about committees. Because we all work and we all have family obligations, while we appoint ourselves to committees and we assign alternates, often it's a bit of a fluid group, and so everybody sits on every committee at one point or another during the year, just literally from a logistics point of view. We're hoping to free up more time throughout the year to have additional committee meetings and also additional open meetings for finance curriculum. Obviously, we'd never have an open personnel meeting, but we're hoping to put a little more flexibility in the calendar. So I just want to make a comment about the committees. While there's names listed here, we all actually sit on all of them throughout the year, depending on schedules. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? And okay. Yes. Yes. Mr. DeQuilla?
Agenda item E1 for the committees. Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Ms. Ciccarelli.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Mr. Connors.
Yes.
Ms. Cronin.
Yes.
Mr. Franz.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
Mr. Nonamaker.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes.
Agenda item passes 9-0.
Excellent, thank you. And now, Peter, we're moving into our regular scheduled program. Okay. Just before I start the regular meeting with the President's comments, I did want to acknowledge a former board member who is stepping down after many, many years of service here, 2.5 terms, roughly, to round it out. Mr. Belding here, who is in the audience, and yeah. But I'm not done saying kind words, my friend. Mr. Belding has been with us for 2.5 terms, and prior to that, he was on the Milburn School Board, so he brings a tremendous amount of experience from a school board perspective. But more than that, he's had about 3 very distinct careers, each of which he's been very, very generous with his time and his talents. And the children of Chatham and the resident of Chathams have certainly benefited from his knowledge and experience. For me personally, he has helped tutor me and mentor me and, help me along, and we've had some interesting discussions and not always on the same page, but nevertheless, it was always out of a great deal of respect. And again, Mr. Belding cannot be any more generous with his time and his talents, and I personally thank you, and I thank you for the school districts of the Chathams.
Those are very kind words. Thank you so much, Jill. It's been a great honor to serve on the board. Just a tremendous opportunity for anybody who is, whoever might think about serving on a great community service organization. The Board of Ed is a tremendous opportunity to learn so much. It's been a distinct honor, and I'm sure that the board is in at least as good hands as it was a month or so ago when I've been on the board. From the looks of things, it'll be a tremendous board, and I wish you great success. And just remember to do what's right for the kids of town, and I'm sure you will, and what's right for the people of Chatham Borough and Township. So thank you very much for the kind words, and it's been my honor and pleasure.
Thank you, Tom. I just invite my other board members. They've also, some of them have spent more time with Mr. Belding, who served as president for at least 2 years, and I got to tell you, it's not an easy position. This is a very demanding group. We're very, strong-willed group, and Tom did an excellent job of herding us and keeping everybody focused and moving down in the right path. So I would like to invite my board members. I'm going to start with Mr. Nonamaker, if I could, on my right, and move down to Ms. Ciccarelli, who can just say thank you, Tom. Who you happen to be neighbors.
Tom, not only were you an excellent board member, your heart was always in the right place, as you said here.
John, Mike, please.
That's the first time somebody asked me to use the mic. You were an excellent board member. Your heart was always in the right place. Your heart was in the place of the community and the children. And in addition to being a great example, you were a tutor, at least for me. I believe you were on the board 2 or 3 years before I got on the board. And you were an excellent mentor. And I thank you very much for all that you've done for the Board of Education, and for me, and for the kids, and for the teachers, and for Dr. LaSousa, and for the Beatles. Thank you very much, Tom. You will be sorely missed. I will really miss you.
Thank you, John.
Tom, it's been a pleasure having been on the board with you over the last couple of years. We haven't always agreed, but I've never questioned your motives or your intent. It was always the kids came first. It was always the education. It was always what was best. You brought a even hand and levelness to all discussions. Behind closed doors at the committee meetings, the discussions can get quite heated, but Tom was always a voice of reason, and I always appreciated your advice, and like John, I learned an awful lot from you. You were a guy that could always be counted upon. What most of you may not realize, when Tom became president, was during a transition period. Jim O'Neill, who had been a long-standing leader of the community, and when he left, there were certain concerns regarding Jim's departure, and Tom stood tall. He was that bridge, and I think he provided a tremendous amount of help and support to the administration during that time, from Mike LaSousa, who I think can speak for the entire administration, expressing their gratitude. But Tom, you were terrific. You were a wonderful leader, and you will be missed. And I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Rich.
Tom, I'd just like to thank you for all you did for us. I think these guys have said enough in terms of what you've done and what you provided for us. So I'll say ditto on that. And thank you for all your time and efforts. I know it's very difficult for you to get up here from your job. But it was time spent. Thanks a lot. And
Thanks, man.
Spend a lot more time in Colorado.
I only want to say, too, is, I had a tendency to get myself in trouble in the beginning. Because I had a big mouth and I like to, definitely speak my mind. So Tom was always very good at helping me see the light, straighten me out when I needed to be put in my place. And I, too, learned a lot from you and appreciated that you were always, spoke your mind in a very elegant way, and we're going to miss you. Thank you. Thank you for everything.
You guys got a big agenda up there, don't feel out like that.
We got time, Tom.
Oh, you have to stay.
I just wanted to say, it was a tremendous honor serving with you. Thing that jumps to my mind when I think of it is look before you leap. Very much different and varied and experienced perspective. Tom always brought, and much valued, and you will be missed. Appreciate the time together.
Thank you.
Tom, thank you. I remember when you were appointed, and I was sitting out there when you were filling a vacancy, and it seemed like a really long time ago, and it was. And thank you for the time that you've dedicated to the board, to the school district, to our town. You know, you really don't have skin in the game. You don't have kids in the school, but you always gave such a healthy perspective. You always came, made time. I feel like any meeting I was at, you were there, and I appreciate that. And you will definitely be missed, and don't go far, because I'm sure we'll be calling on you for things. But thank you.
Michelle.
I would like to just echo the same comments of your dedication and the hard work that you've put into the board. And on a personal level, when my son had some health issues, I'd like to thank you for being sensitive to that and backfilling my commitments so that I could focus on that. And it just showed a lot of sensitivity and your character. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
And Tom, thanks for passing the baton. I'm coming over to your house when I need a drink, so don't move far.
Well, you got a great position. Listen, you guys are an outstanding team, and Mike and Peter and Beth and Karen, it's been an honor to work with you, so I wish you all great success, and get on with the agenda.
Thank you, Tom, I appreciate it.
You bet.
And
Anytime.
again, thank you for your time and your generous talents.
You got it.
Is that a free pass into any Cougar athletic event?
That's right. Lifetime tickets.
Oh. Really. Thank you again. So continuing in my president's remarks, moving into the agenda, a regular agenda now, I just want to thank everybody for coming out here again today. And I'm going to defer my initial remarks about the referendum and the vote to the Finance and Facilities Committee Chair, since he was, spearheading the operation. So I'm going to defer to Mr. Gilfillan and then follow up right behind Matt.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I guess the number one thing to do is thank you for coming out to vote. We generally speaking have a low 20s kind of figure. We were up north of 40%, so obviously the town had wanted their voice to be heard, and they came out to express either their pleasure or displeasure with that. So coming from that, we need to decide two things. One is what's the ramification of a no vote, and two is where do we go from here? And where do we go from a finance and facility committee, and then what we recommend up to the board from that. As you know, in our opinion, we felt there was a need for a new facility in order for us to get the flexibility of changing many aspects of the district from a classroom perspective, from a curricular perspective with supports of classroom into the STEM, the athletic facilities. But the number one thing that we always had to remember in everything we did is that our intent and our sole goal going into this was the arts. And it was putting in a facility that was reflective of the quality of the arts program in this town. We looked at multiple different ways to refurbish the existing facilities, both at the middle school as well as the high school. Most of them, actually all of them, did not work. And the ripple effect of taking down those facilities and at that point trying to achieve the goals of additional classrooms and other athletic facilities, the cost was actually more dramatic than what we had proposed. Also from a structural standpoint, we were limited in terms of what we could do with the existing facilities in order to achieve the goals that we were established by the committee, the board, through significant input from the arts community. So right now, we need to go back to the drawing board. What we can do from a perspective in the near term is purely cosmetic. But I look at that as basically putting lipstick on a pig. And no matter what we would do right now, we would lose space within the auditoriums. We can't really restructure them in order to gain the goals that we looked at in terms of set space and dressing rooms, all the different things that we needed. And then, of course, gain the flexibility in terms of the new classrooms and where we could reconfigure the middle school. That is going to take, I believe, a significant amount of time because we have to go back to the drawing board. Okay, we don't have a simple plan B here in terms of what we can do to adjust those facilities in order to achieve our goals. As stated, we looked at numerous ways to do it. They didn't work, so we need to now go back and try to figure out if we can make it work, how do we make it work, and what is the time frame associated with that. So right now, we have to adjust what I believe are the priorities of the Finance and Facility Committee. And the number one priority and what we promised the arts is that we were going to figure out a solution. We are not abandoning the arts. We are going to work that much harder to try to figure something out in order to give the kids of this town what we believe they deserve. Until said time, it will be difficult for us to come back with a referendum that is not focused on the arts as our primary goal. We're not going to come back, I don't believe, this would be my recommendation, is not coming back with a referendum that focuses solely on classrooms or the athletic facilities. That was not our intention going in. The reason we added those programs was due to the fact that we saw an opportunity from a holistic referendum perspective and a financial perspective to ask for everything that we felt would put the district at the top of the charts in terms of its facilities, and then understanding how those facilities would lead to better curriculum, better athletics, better overall experience for the children of Chatham. That is no longer available to us. So we're going to sharpen the pencils, we're going to ask more questions, we are going to sit down with the arts community, and we're going to try to figure something out and try to make it work. Okay, I don't know what the time frame is on that. It's going to be a significant, I would imagine, since we spent a significant amount of time looking at a number of options previously, is that it could take a long time in order to bring that back to the table. We also need to, as a Facility and Finance Committee, spend a significant amount of time over the next year to address two things. One is on the ESIP program, which we have been approved for, and we are going to have to see through the implementation of the ESIP program over the next number of months to years. It is a large program. It is going to take care of a lot of the issues we have in our facilities, from windows to boilers to all different kinds of things that we've had as on a wish list from a Board of Ed perspective for many years. We are now positioned to get in essence, capital infusion from an outside party to address all these things that we wanted to for years. The other massive issue that probably is going to take a significant amount of time from the Finance and Facility group is on the expected pension reforms that are sitting out in front of us. I don't know if any of you have read the report by the Independent Commission as to where they would like to take pension payments and, more importantly, retiree health care benefit payments going forward. There's a lot of information that's not yet available to the public. It is kind of vague in terms of the recommendations, but there is a chance that if these reforms go through as is, it is a massive and significant financial impact to the district that we need to be prepared for. And what you on the surface see is an adjustment in terms of the pension payments. Right now, it's the state and the employee who fund that. They're looking to shift that to a combination of the employee as well as the district. So the district would have to pick up a significant portion of pension payments to our employees on an annual basis. Right now, we are not prepared for that. The bigger one and the scarier one is what happens with retiree health care benefits. Right now, we do not pay for them. They are funded by the state. If they come back onto our P&L, it would have a massive, significant impact from us from a fiscal basis. And right now, we would have to either significantly adjust our operating expenses to address these new costs or ask for a pretty large tax increase. I am unsure right now whether or not we even have the authority to ask for this tax increase, nor would I give it much chance of actually passing. So we didn't have, in conclusion, we didn't have this easy and flexible Plan B for the referendum because of the fact that the options I think people expected from us for Plan B really weren't realistic, nor are they, and we have to go back and see if we can figure out a new way to go forward. And I believe that there are more now pressing issues that the focus of this facility and finance and then eventually the Board of Ed need to focus on in the upcoming year. So with that, I am unsure as to a time frame or actually a desire to bring back a referendum until the arts is figured out. And, so I want to make sure that the arts people know we haven't given up. We're not going to give up. We are going to do our best to try to bring something forward. I want to let the community know I think that some of the priorities have changed from a facility and finance perspective of where we are, where we need to be, and where the dangers lie out there in terms of a dollar perspective for the district budget. But we will put the work in to try to make something happen and achieve the goals that we set out for ourselves when we took on this whole referendum, whatever, 6 months ago. So I think that's where we're headed. I think it's where we will spend most of our time, and we look forward to the meetings with the public in terms of how to get this done, the input from all the different board members on how to get this done, and looking for new ideas in terms of how do we achieve the goals that we set out for ourselves.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. Thank you for the summary. And so the items don't come off our strategic plan. It's just a matter of planning them out and chunking them up, maybe a little bit smaller. But the items are still on the strategic plan. And I know this sounds stating the obvious, but a strategic plan has very little meaning with no funding. I could put together a beautiful 25-page PowerPoint with a strategic plan, but without funding to implement, it's just words on a paper, which, again, will continue to drive toward a plan. But without funding, you just can't implement. And unfortunately, some of the things that Mr. Gilfillan mentioned may start to cut into our actual operating budget. And we have a 2% cap, and the 2% cap is there to obviously protect the residents of the town to ensure spending doesn't just run amok and that there is, in fact, a limit. But sometimes 2%, depending on the year, with healthcare costs or energy costs, depending on, and these are, beyond our control, sometimes 2% just keeps the lights on. So a lot of people say, oh, strategic plan, and Mr. Gilfillan has about 18 years worth of facilities items he'd like to attack, and curriculum has about 15 years of items. But without funding, a strategic plan is simply just a nice way of saying a list of items you want to get to. But thank you again. I just wanted to point out that the voter turnout was 35%, and in healthy spirit of competitive nature, I think it was 40% in the borough and 30% in the township to round out to 35. But again, that's more than double that usually comes out for a school budget vote. So that was fantastic to see. So thank you very much. That is the conclusion of my reports. I just want to give folks who don't usually attend these meetings a general glimpse into where we go next here on the meeting. So next we do some administrative reports from Dr. LaSousa and Mr. Tequila. Then we move into committee reports, a summary of what took place in committee outside of the public board meeting. We quickly do liaison report, except for my report, which is not a quick report for Music Theater Boosters. And then we go into the regular business. After that, between the liaison reports, we have one opportunity for public commentary. And then after we go through the regular agenda, there's a second opportunity for public commentary. So I didn't want you to think that the first time was your only opportunity. There's also one toward the end. So in case people are trying to time their attendance here, I just want to give you a glimpse of the agenda to follow. So without further ado, I'm going to pass that on to Dr. LaSousa for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. I have a few items. Begin with some bad news. We received word over the spring break that one of our paraprofessionals, who also is a district parent, Ms. Diane Sullivan, passed away. So I'd like to extend the sympathies of the school district to the Sullivan family. And then this morning, apparently, I got word that one of our cafeteria workers, who technically works for Chartwell's, she passed away either last night or this morning. So our sympathies also are with her family. I'd like to make note of several other items. We are in the midst or the process of the second go-around with park testing. There's nothing that significant to report on our end. Our number of refusals at the high school has increased, and in the junior year in particular, at this point, the majority of our students are refusing to take the test. Governor Christie and Commissioner Hespy both issued some words of warning for districts with high refusal rates, and although we have not received any written communication from the state, Commissioner Hespy indicated that every school in New Jersey with a participation rate below 95% will be placed on a corrective action plan, so we will anticipate that happening for a couple of our schools. And Governor Christie has been a little bit more direct about the possibility of funding loss for districts that do not hit the 95% threshold. So we will await formal communication from the DOE, but naturally we're concerned and will kind of remain abreast of whatever developments are related to park. I mentioned that there are a couple of retirements on the agenda. Marilyn Kelly and Anne-Marie DeMasi, two teachers who have served the district for a long time. I appreciate all of their service to the students of the school district. Milton Avenue School, as you know, has a principalship vacancy that we are in the process of filling. Just wanted to update the board that we had 126 applicants for that position. Ms. Grant and I have screened 25 of the top applicants, and we are heading toward a committee interview with the goal of having the replacement named in June. I will mention that toward the end of this agenda, as per our agreement with the teachers, we have an additional snow day remaining in our school calendar. That day will be converted into a day off from school, and that day is the Friday before Memorial Day weekend. And I will apprise parents of that tomorrow with an alert once the board acts. And then finally, my last item is just I'll complete the kudos round. I think it was about 5 years ago when Jim O'Neill brought me in for an interview as assistant superintendent, and there was this big guy in the corner with a voice who intimidated me. That was Tom Belding, and what a great, terrific person I have had the privilege to know in Tom Belding. By my count, he was the board president for 3 years, including the year in which we had an interim superintendent between Jim O'Neill and me. And also during my first year as superintendent, when we got to experience Hurricane Sandy a few months into the partnership. So Tom has just been a terrific source of wisdom. His experience in Milburn has helped, I think, guide us here in Chatham. And he's the type of guy who says things like, "I learned how to snowboard when I was 56 years old." That's just the type of person he is. He's hungry to experience newness in his life, and he's just a terrific person, and I want to wish him the best in his retirement from the board. And that's my report.
Mike, was there statistics from why the parents are holding their kids out of these park tests? Is there anything that's indicative? Is there anything that's common thread? And what is the general consensus on that, is or not?
We've looked at our numbers. I wouldn't say there's a real consistent thread. I know in speaking with other superintendents, and it's true in pockets for us too, that parents of special ed students seem to be more likely to refuse than students of general ed students. The commissioner has noted that the junior class statewide has experienced an 85% participation rate. So there have been about 15% of kids refusing statewide. It seems that perhaps in the more affluent communities there's a greater rate of refusal, but I don't have any real insights into the exact reasons why, other than the obvious, that the test doesn't count, that all of our kids practically will meet the graduation requirement without having to sit for the test, and that here we are more or less in the second testing window, and we have scores and scores, huge numbers of kids at Chatham High School in the junior class who are getting ready for AP tests, and so therefore they view Park, right or wrong, they view it as somewhat of a distraction to their AP preparation. So
And their SAT and ACT tests
there are a
that
host
they
of
take
factors
throughout the year, throughout junior year.
Mike,
Mike, can I just, oh, I'm sorry, Lotta.
Oh, just, I know for the first window of the testing, there was an issue of a little bit of disruption for those that were taking the test, were with the kids that were refusing. Was that addressed in the second go-around, or was that less of an issue?
It's been a less of an issue from what's been reported to me. I think the main reason for that was initially at the high school we were testing, before lunch, and when it came up near lunch hour and kids wanted to get out and eat lunch, they were getting antsy. We changed the time that we're administering the various sessions or beginning the various sessions, and what is more commonplace now than was common a couple of months ago is that parents are removing their students from school during testing so that the students just are not present.
What about the other grades? You indicated that the junior grades, for whatever reasons, the numbers are lower. How are the other grades faring in terms of taking the test?
They almost follow a linear line, or whatever you want to call it. In other words, the sophomores and freshmen are not quite as bad as the junior class. The middle school is not as good as is worse. Worse or good. The middle school has lower rates of refusal than the high school does, and by the time you get down to Lafayette, especially fourth grade, and then in the third grades, there are virtually no refusals.
So by all accounts, does it appear as though we'll be below this 95%?
Yes.
Marker? Now,
As a district, definitely, and as a high school and middle school, yes.
is there, I think I know the answer to the question, there's nothing we can do to force a parent to have their child sit for the exam, correct?
Correct, nor would we want to, I don't think.
But we're going to be, but Trenton is just going to look at that as a bright line if we're below it. I mean, we can't do anything if a parent says, I'm not going to have my kid sit for it, and we're going to get punished. Is there anything, is there a recourse? I mean, is this just in the talking stage in terms of the penalties that they're kicking around?
Yes, I think it's a talking stage. They're intimating what the consequences may be, but we have not received anything in written or formal correspondence.
Is it likely that any penalties will most likely take effect next year and not the first year?
Yes, I would say so.
So this could be just rattling the saber? I mean, were there indications before the tests were given that if a district fell below the 95%, there would be ramifications?
Yes.
There was?
Absolutely.
And those ramifications spelled out in terms of loss of aid and funding?
Yes, but there is a lot of debate over whether any loss of aid has ever occurred as a result of test refusals, whether or not the federal government would follow through with that, whether or not, if the federal government were to follow through, what recourse the state would have. Almost all of our federal funding comes in the form of IDEA and special ed funding, if you will, that we get from the federal government. So that's where we would be vulnerable. It would seem to me ludicrous to withhold funding for special education students because of a decision on the part of parents to refuse to have their kids take a test.
And my last question, does it now maybe too early to tell, but does it appear that the higher end districts are going to have a higher percentage of students who don't take the test?
I can only speak anecdotally and say yes to that, but there's variation among the J and I districts that I have had contact with.
Anecdotally, I've heard people whose children go to districts that are at the other end of the spectrum and the percentage is much higher with regard to students taking the test. And the reason being that some people didn't know that they had the ability to opt out. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Lasuso, where did that 95% come from?
That comes from the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, so it's a federal number, and it's been in place for many, at least since No Child Left Behind went into effect, I believe.
I just have a question, in terms of if they're going to put these, ramifications in place, It was the state that came out and said that every parent had the, it was clear that you could opt your child out. So if they're saying that, they're giving, it was put out there. So I think we need to be proactive in our responses and think ahead of the curve. The other thing is this. They made a graduation requirement that students had to pass the PARC or whatever they're deeming their passing mark, or whether it was PSAT or another, SAT or ACT score. So you could have, this is only going to become more problematic down the road. You could have freshmen sit once, meet the benchmark, they're going to sit out the next 3 years they're in high school. What's the incentive to sit? So I think, from a state level, they need to reevaluate. And they might have to say whether or not a student, hits it. You have to sit for it a certain amount of times in order to graduate or something, because it can't be upon us to police the situation. If they're making the graduation required a one-time passing benchmark, we don't know what it is, then why would students sit for it? And I think to go back, many students went to the high school and they elected to opt out. Their parents did not know. They sat and refused to take. So, I don't think we can, it was kind of a wildfire that got going, and that's what happened. And so I think we need to think of ways to kind of control that. I don't know that we can tell kids to sit and take it, but I think that's sort of what happened. Many parents didn't know their kids weren't taking it until they got notified. So I just think it was sort of a perfect storm, but I think, the state's putting these, I'm using the word punishments or these things in place on situations that were out of our control and will only get worse unless they change the requirements.
I agree.
It seems to me like it's harsh and it's a contradiction in terms that a test that's not mandatory, we would get punished. Sorry. Is it on? I'll talk louder. It really seems like a contradiction in terms where it's a harsh reality that we would be punished if 95% of the kids don't take, if we fall below that 95% mark for a test that's not mandatory. I mean, how could that be?
We've asked the same question of the officials from the DOE, and I think their response initially was that they didn't want to, there was enough controversy with PARC, they didn't want to alarm people even more, and so they wanted to have alternative pathways to get to high school graduation requirement. So it's mandatory to administer PARC, and if students are in school, they're supposed to be given the exam, but there's nothing you can do to force someone to take a test. And like Michelle was mentioning, we also have students who are taking the test and just not, they're deliberately not putting forth their best effort on the test. So it's hard for me to understand why we would hold their teachers accountable in the form of teacher evaluation ratings and such when the teachers are not at fault for the actions of the students in this case.
Well, that's why I asked also where did the 95% come from, and you said by statute. And then the issue for me is, was the statute meant to apply to this non-mandatory test?
That I'm not sure of. Probably not. At least the PARC test wasn't in existence at the time the 95% rule was established.
So it would appear to me that the rule, 95% rule, predates this test, and therefore is really not applicable. I mean, that's an argument that can be made.
I think you are thinking like an attorney.
I mean, it wasn't envisioned, right? It wasn't meant to cover this test.
But it was meant to cover the NJ-ASC, which, on the test before that, and the HESPAs and, state mandated tests. I mean, I'm with you, John, for sure. And maybe that's the number that gets adjusted.
The 95% rule, no question, was designed to ensure that schools were not hiding students. They weren't essentially, encouraging students not to come into school the day of the test so that the scores wouldn't look good, because you could establish a baseline and then you could, try to administer the test to certain groups of students to increase the school's performance. So the 95% rule, I think, clearly was designed so that you had to assess all of your students, you had to compare year over year how your students performed without trying to get around the system and show a fake performance.
I just want to say one other thing, too. One of the big differences between the NJ-ASC and the PARC and why people are opting out at least, a lot of the feedback that I've been getting is because they have tests. So like I know my own daughter, there were a lot of kids who were opting out because they had tests on that day. What used to happen with the NJ the schools used to say no testing because it was a set period of time. But as we discussed, since the park is such a long period of time, you guys don't say that. But like I know, so the freshman class had like 3 honors tests the same day as park. Now some kids, that's fine, they don't care, they could sit there and take tests all day. But for a lot of kids, they get very stressed out. So to take a park test in the morning and be all stressed out for a test that doesn't count, and then later that day have 3 honors tests, which is going to impact their grades and their GPA, and what's important to getting into college. So those parents are opting those kids out because they don't want them to blow those tests. And that's the difference. With NJ you didn't have tests. With Park, you do. So that's why at least a lot of the freshmen I know opted out on those test days. And then if you missed one, you couldn't, they had, I think, one makeup day.
Well, there was no NJS for 9th graders. The only test was in 11th
No, but I'm
grade
just
for
saying in
HESPA,
general,
right, and it was
that in the-
confined, so it was confined to 3 days, I think it was. And it, most students, we didn't have an absolute no test or no assessment policy while HESPA was taking place. There are mixed classes that have groups of juniors and sophomores that were continuing to operate. But you only had juniors being tested for a few days, and it was in the morning, and everything was, contained.
Right.
But Park is obviously very, very different. The biggest jump is at the high school level, where you're tripling the amount of testing because you're going from 1 grade level to 3.
Right, and where your GPA is very important. So that is, at least a lot of the feedback I've been getting the issue. The days that they have a lot of tests and the kids get stressed, they opt out.
Thank you. Any other comments on Park? I did have a question on your other item, that report, and if you're not at liberty to say, that's fine, I can get behind that. You had mentioned that one of the cafeteria workers had passed away, and our students get very close with them, and I didn't know if it was one that was more up front, and if the students, were made aware of it or even prepared, no?
I don't know her last name, but she is one of the people. I know that Mr. Groh was upset, and
Okay.
it's someone that he interacts with pretty regularly.
Do you know her first name?
The only thing I can add, I know that the employee, and I apologize, I don't even have her name, is
Okay.
that she spent a lot of time working in the Cougar Deli, so she was at high school.
Yeah, okay, so,
I only found out, basically at close of business today.
right, that being said, I just, a word of caution, maybe, just, make sure the counselors are aware of that, because they do spend a tremendous amount of time with the students, and some of them have been there decades, and, every kid by name, and there's tears at the end of their senior year, and hugs and cries, so just please be aware that they have a very special relationship with the workers in the cafeteria.
We will Mike will I'm sure will keep that in mind, because we also found out that one of her other jobs was that she was also a bus driver for First Student. I don't know if she did any Chatham runs, or if she worked at, or if she did, which district run. So she may also have been interacting with students that way.
Okay. So, a word of caution, just to be cognizant of the fact that they do have a very tight relationship, and again, they interact with them throughout the day. In Cougar Deli, the kids are in there throughout the day, and after school, they pick up subs before they go to their after-school events. Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. LaSousa on any of the topics? No? Very good. Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind with the business administrator report?
My report will be brief. I just have to, get back on the bandwagon, although I think Tom may have ducked out. I did want to thank him for all his efforts in being part of the committee that hired me. He was very enjoyable to work with, and a lot of times made the BA's job much easier, and all the guidance and support he did in working with the board members and the administration. That's all I have to report.
Very good. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to the committee reports. We're going to start off with personnel. Ms. Clark, would you mind leading us off with personnel? Didn't you just chair that meeting? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. It says Jill, and I'm like, well, that's certainly not right. I'm sorry, Ms. Kenny. I apologize.
We continue to discuss best practices for administrative structures within school organizations, and we also reviewed 2015 retirements.
Excellent. Thank you. And we look forward to any breakage, although those retirements are it's very, they're going to be missed sorely. I mean, they've been here forever. So moving on to curriculum, Ms. Kenny again?
Yes, so we have not met since our last meeting.
Okay, very good, thank you. Finance and facilities, I don't know if you have anything to add, Mr. Gilfillan, or you're pretty good?
We have not met since our last
Meet on May 27th.
meeting on May 27th.
6:30.
May 27th?
May 27th.
Okay, that's a Wednesday. Okay, very good. Moving on to policy and planning, Mr. Franz?
We met last week and transitioned over from Mr. Belding to myself. We discussed going forward sportsmanship at events, athletic code of conduct, interaction with coaches, all very preliminary, but certainly looking at the policy and what we can do to bring it up to speed, kind of looking at from all perspectives, something that we focus on and firm up. And then we also, within the same meeting, looking at the schedule going forward for the new year, these Board of Ed meeting schedules, and just trying to be as efficient as possible, looking at, again, versus the borough when they meet, and other conflicting groups in town, and just, again, trying to see if there's any efficiency there to establish. So all very preliminary, but we've kicked off the discussions for all.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Franz on any of those topics? Calendar, sportsmanship, other? Very good.
What is the next policy meeting?
I don't know,
I don't know either.
off the top of my head.
These reorg meetings are always a little kludgy. The committees are switching, the dates are switching.
I can tell you by the end.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. You'll let us know. Negotiations, Mr. Connors?
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Moving on to liaison reports, back to Mr. Connors.
For the Chatham Borough, nothing to report.
Very good, thank you.
Related to the board.
Thank you. Chatham Township, Ms. Clark?
I actually do have something to report. The Township Committee wanted us to know that at their last meeting, they voted to allocate money toward the teen room at the library that our students will benefit from when it's completed. The library renovation is about a 2-year project, so I don't know exactly where in the timeline that will fall in, but they just wanted to let us know they're moving forward and supporting that. They're one of the funders of that project.
Excellent, thank you. Appreciate that.
Could I jump back in? I think it's May 13th, Rich.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions for Ms. Clark on the teen room? John, you are prohibited from going into the teen room. Athletic boosters, Mr. Connors, the Chatham High School Athletic Boosters
Yes,
liaison?
they met, the last meeting was April 7th, 2015. During that meeting, a number of items were discussed. Once again, the boosters are showing their desire and willingness to support the Chatham programs, have agreed to donate close to several $1,000s to various expenses to help underwrite programs, including soccer, videotaping of the boys and girls lacrosse, also purchasing lunches for the girls softball team and adding a backstop. During one of the sessions, the topic became somewhat heated, dealing with the condition of the baseball field behind the high school. And it's because of the winter, because it being grass, not being turf, we are captive of the weather and how the winter proceeds into the spring. So obviously a bad winter with snow and ice and cold will have an adverse effect. However, it's my understanding that the high school has come forward, the administration is coming forward with a proposed maintenance agreement going forward. It's fairly detailed, that will go from February through November months. Just to highlight some of the more salient aspects that the administration is committed to doing is in February, they will be putting down, working on the infield and the outfield, and also working on the pitcher's mound, doing general maintenance with regard to the removal of weeds, and also affecting the lips that do occur during the field during the winter season. In March, they'll continue to work on the fields, grooming them and installing posts for the outside the fences along the outfield, also installing bases, and again, attempting as best they can in that season to provide seed and maintenance for the field. And similar maintenance will continue through April, May, and June with getting the fields ready for actual playing. Will include the seeding, also putting down the lines and maintenance, and then continuing through July and August and September, providing additional focus to the fields. Again, having a grass field is a very difficult, in the long term, it's very expensive to maintain it because you're putting in assets and resources, and plus you're taking up the time of the maintenance committee and the maintenance crew. We only have so many of them, and their responsibilities are significant to begin with. But we will have made a commitment to the baseball folks, and as well as the girls field hockey. Is that who played in that one? Field hockey. Yes. To do the best we can to keep that field in playing condition. It's used an awful lot with high school phys ed, and so hopefully the board will make that commitment and the results will speak for themselves. I would like to also note that the next booster meeting is on May 5th, 2015 at 7 p.m. But I'd like to close on the booster fundraising. They have a spring event, and it's going to be Friday, May 22nd at Noe. I know that's the Friday before Memorial Day weekend. I know I just found out that the schools will be closed, so maybe people will be leaving early. But if you are going to be around, and it's not just limited to high school parents, because it is a terrific evening. The boosters do a tremendous amount to support our program, and I think it's important that we in kind support the boosters. So if you are available, please go. You'll meet some old friends, meet some new friends. It's at Noe this year. Again, Noe Pond, Friday, May 22nd, 2015, starting about 7 a.m. 7 p.m.
All day.
You Irish people are 7 a.m.
The Irish will start at 7 a.m. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Connors. Any questions on Mr. Connors' report, if you dare?
Yeah,
Really?
Rich, is the proposed maintenance schedule realistic for February and March if the ground is frozen?
Yes, I do. I think what they're going to be doing is going to be more proactive. They're going to be making a more concerted effort. So I think attempts will be made. But listen, if the fields are covered with 3 feet of snow in February and March, or if it's raining, then it's going to affect the ability to implement a maintenance program that will have lasting effect. One of the downsides of an all-grass back field. But yeah, I mean, we are going to be dictated in large part by the weather, and there's certain facts of life. We live in the Northeast. It snows in February and March. So they will do the best that they can to keep the fields in the best condition possible.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Rich. And turfing those fields will just, again, stay on the long-term plan, and when funding becomes available, we'll get to those projects as well. Moving on to the music theater boosters, sit back for a minute because I have a lengthy report. So after highly competitive auditions over the past 2 weekends, 4 of our Chatham High School singers were named to the 2015-2016 New Jersey All-State Chorus. So the students will begin rehearsal in June. They'll rehearse throughout the summer, and they will, in the fall and the winter months, they will perform both in Atlantic City and at the NJ Pack Center. Senior guitarist Derek Walsh, who's been involved in performing arts since probably kindergarten, he's graduating this year, so we'll miss him. He participated in the Southern Boulevard Earth Day celebration, and he serenaded the students as they came in singing the song Outdoors, Jason Mraz's song. So that was nice that he came back to his old school and serenaded the kids and showed them a little bit about performing arts. The Chatham High School Music Department recently completed hosting the 2015 Festival of Music, and that's over a 4-day period, March 28th through April 24th, 31 performing groups with over 1,000 students, musicians, came into the high school auditorium. They perform here and they're adjudicated by professional adjudicators, and they're on a bit of a tour and they're on their way to New York City, and they stop over here and they participate in adjudication sessions. The Festival of Music continues to be a major fundraiser for the Chatham Music Theater Boosters, and it's those volunteers that help facilitate those festivities, as well as the Chatham High School students also help. In fact, some of the performers are from Canada, and some of our high school French students help with a little translation with some of the adults that don't speak French. So that's awful nice of them to come down and volunteer, and they get a little practice in the use of the language that they're studying. So Jazz in the Middle was held at the Chatham Middle School auditorium last week, and it features 9 ensembles from several middle school jazz bands, from around the state, and that was under the direction of Christy Spriggs, who coordinated the event. It is now in its 6th year. Director Brian Conte also co-adjudicated. If you attend some of the Jazz in the Middle, Miss Spriggs, you may think she's one of the students there, but she's been doing this for a number of years, and she looks like she's about 12, so she might blend in with the students, but she's the force behind the Jazz in the Middle at the middle school. On Thursday, April 30th, 219 members of the Chatham High School music department will depart. That's this Thursday, for any of you that have students that will be leaving you for the weekend. They're preparing for their performance trip in Harrisburg, Hershey, Pennsylvania. So during the trip, the students will participate in 7 performing groups, and they will perform at the Rose City Center, performing at the Visual Arts. They will also receive master class from the Gettysburg College of Music faculty, your alma mater, Dr. DeSouza. Over their 3 days and 2 nights, they will spend a lot of time together, dining experience, and they will also get to experience some of the local venues, and they will also go into Hershey Park. The cost of that trip was reduced by $100 per student because of the efforts of the Chatham Music Theater Boosters and the fundraiser Festival of Music. So that goes directly back to the students, and it reduces their costs, and it enables, as many kids as possible to go. And just wrapping up, on May 3rd, approximately 50 Chatham students in grades 5 through 8 will be participating in the 2015 Morris Union Jointure Commission Spring Festival, and that's at New Providence. And the Chatham musicians, they've been rehearsing for 2 or 3 months, but it's the first time some of these students have rehearsed and performed with other areas. It's about 8 or 9 other schools that come together, so where they're used to playing with the student to their left or their right, it's all mixed up. They get to different band directors, so they get different styles of instruction, and they get to learn tips from each other, which is a really nice experience. So all the kids come back, thrilled and jazzed up, and they spread that enthusiasm throughout their seats in their orchestra. And then just also on May 3rd at 2:30, the Chatham Music Chorus members will perform a collaborative concert with the Concord Singers in a program at the Calvary Episcopal Church in Summit. It's called Sounds of a Better World, and that's a community concert in Summit. Thank you very much. I know that was a little lengthy, but well worth it. Good stuff happening in performing arts. So I would like to pass a motion to have the minutes approved for the public session of April 6th. Sorry, I'm assuming none of my fellow board members had any questions on the music theater report. Oh. Wow, sorry about that. My bad. It's not on my agenda.
And PTO's not
It's not on my agenda. I don't call it out, son.
Okay, I apologize.
I'm only teasing.
It's on my cheat sheet, so I apologize for not being there.
Mr. Nonamaker, anything to report with recreation?
Nothing to do with the Board of Ed.
Thank you. Ms. Cronin, PTO, District Cabinet?
Meeting next Wednesday, we have not met since.
And there's one more missing.
And
Oh, CF, thank you very much.
there is nothing to report at this time.
Oh, very good, thank you.
We see you knew that already.
Yeah, I wish I didn't waste my I wish I'd picked the lottery numbers instead of knowing that ahead of time. I'd like to pass a motion to move the minutes for the public session of April 6th and the public and executive session for April 8th, both 2015.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor? Opposed? Are there abstentions?
Yes, Ms. Ciccarelli will abstain on both. Ms. Cronin on 4-6, Ms. Clark, Mr. Gilfield, and Ms. Kenny on 4-8.
4-8, okay.
The first one passes 702, the other one passes 5-0.
There,
Fi-
right. I was here for the audit.
Thank you.
Oh, no, this is just, no, I was not here.
I was here for the audit.
So, I'm sorry, Peter, could you repeat the first one?
The 4-6 minutes have 702 passing, both Ms. Ciccarelli and Ms. Cronin abstain on 4-6. On 4-8, we have abstentions from Ms. Ciccarelli, Ms. Clark, Mr. Gilfield, and Ms. Kenny, so that passes 504.
504, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we have our first opportunity for public commentary. We only have a mic on the right-hand side, so if you would sign in, again, for those that are not as familiar, please introduce yourselves. And depending on, how many people line up, just be cognizant of the time, just be respectful to each other. And, please share with us your thoughts, your questions, your comments. And again, just please line up. I mean, you don't have to stand there for a half hour, but just so the speaker in front knows that somebody else wants to speak.
Jane Devlin, Chatham Township. I have been before the board almost each time it met since September trying to increase awareness about homework and broaden the way it is approached. I hope to start discussions, possibly bring in a guest speaker, address it on a climate survey, and facilitate overall change. The literature does postulate stress levels of youth are on the increase, with the correlation that homework may be contributing to fatigue and a loss of respite time, factors which decrease mindfulness and increase stress. Stress is toxic. Therefore, I urge we consider the homework issue in relation to well-being of youth, no one in particular youngster, no one particular grade or class, rather the well-being of all our youth. Many a time when I speak, I hear soft groans from the audience as if I would speculate to say, there she goes again, or this doesn't pertain to our group, or why is she going on when we heard this before? But I continue because change or broadening of the minds doesn't happen overnight or the first time. Much for the same reason, I urge the Board of Ed not to abandon its vision for all our students concerning classroom space, STEM labs, safer and enhanced auditorium, and fields. I was glad to hear from the Finance Committee today that reassessment will happen. Please don't back away from our students because all your due diligence did demonstrate there is assorted problems in all these areas calling out to be addressed. Go back to the drawing board. Don't send a message to our students when the going gets tough or when there is a lack of success the first time, give in. Further, I would urge improvements stay bundled as one. We are not the school district of the Chatham Athletics or Chatham School of Performing Arts or the Text Institute of Chatham. Rather, we are one school district of Chatham, and we should send a message of unity and not separatism. The sisters do not get to go to the ball while one group, Cinderella, stays home. The no group will say the majority voted no at the polls, but let's reassess or assess the matter. A post-mortem might yield reasons for the no vote. Certainly many vocal no's question the cost of refurbishing and renovations. I have to rhetorically ask, didn't they at least read the most recent mailing from the Board of Ed? Still others voted no, protesting the one-question format. Some others felt the board didn't consult the community before formulating the plans. Quite vocal amongst the no's was the idea programs should come before brick and mortar. However, the board should offer no mea culpas. We are one district serving all students equally. Clearly, the board engaged in time-consuming, thoughtful, methodical, strategic planning, looking at assorted factors before developing a proposal. That's its job as elected officials, to act in the constituents' stead. That wasn't them doing anything secret, and certainly they were never gaining anything personally. There never did exist a question of taking money from programs to build. In fact, many of the special interest groups, such as Chatham STEM, led by Nabil, and advocates for full-day kindergarten, those proponents of increased academics, if you will, would have had at least some of their requests realized by the board's vision. So now, just what did the no vote get us? We didn't vote down the Board of Ed. We voted no. We voted down our students. No to their fields, no to the lower grade classrooms and rooms for teachers, perhaps full-day kindergarten, no to STEM classrooms and enhanced tech classes, and no to auditoriums for their varied performing arts. And we did this when interest rates were low and when the state would have contributed funds. How often do non-Abbott districts get money? All we have now is the status quo. lack of classrooms, muddy fields, a decrepit auditorium with safety issues and fields broken down, and $200 in our already deep pockets. I don't always agree with the Board of Ed, but in this instance it was spot on. They were looking out not only for our children, but generations next. Thank you for that. Please don't let myopic vision of some, or perhaps a hesitancy to think boldly, or the frustration that change comes slowly, make this board second-guess the merits of the original goal. It's hard to please everyone, but I do think if the board reworks, then people may come to understand its goal was nothing less than to serve the best interest of all our students. It's unfortunate that now a year or more will be lapsing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Devlin. Nope. Thank you, Jane.
Hi, Amanda Feeman, Chatham Township. I actually like Jane's analogy of Cinderella because I think I used it several times to my younger daughters in this analogy, and I think sometimes people think you are like fairy godmothers. And unfortunately, I think many in the public have taken for granted that you have been running an excellent district on a shoestring budget. I stand here tonight to say that although the results of the referendum are disappointing to me, I want to thank you for putting forth a proposal that showed that you're willing to invest in the future of our children and our district. And I hope that as you go forward, you continue to put that future forward, not to just think about right now. I think you have some challenges, and some of those you've heard tonight, even as we speak about park testing. I think you're dealing with a unique generation of parents and a split district. I think we see parents across the district who we believe that parents are not only involved, but sometimes parents know best. It is my job as a parent to think about what is best for my children day to day, but I believe it is the leaders of this district to think as what is best for all of the children in our district in the future. We have seen instances with coaches across this year. We have seen instances with teachers. We have now seen a failed referendum because we as parents may not necessarily see what you see, and that is your challenge. Because we, unfortunately, I am not one of them. I actually believe that I'm not an educator. I'm not an administrator. I'm not a trained teacher. And I look to leaders to help guide my opinions. However, I have been married to someone in higher education and have seen the impact of parents who do not necessarily see that way. Those parents are on social media. Those parents are out there providing misinformation. And those parents are trying to provide the best for their children, but they're not necessarily sharing what's accurate and what's true. We are also living in a challenged community. Since I've moved here, I have seen any challenge to change, whether it was changes to Lum Field, whether it was building of Dunkin' Donuts, and now it's this referendum. I've heard many of the same arguments. It doesn't look like it always has looked. It's going to bring lots of traffic. It's going to be too many lights. There's going to be a lot of change. There is a lot of change in this town, and you have a lot of people who have been here for a long time, and you have a lot of new people in town. And I don't envy the position that you sit in to try to marry all of those together, as you saw in this referendum. I encourage you to continue to go forward. I also encourage you to think of education and learning as you did in this referendum, because one of the arguments against this referendum that I continue to hear is that this was not focused enough on things that were happening in the classroom. What I remember from going through my educational experience is that my learning was not limited to the classroom. What took me and what made me successful in life was what has been referred to as extracurricular activities. Whether I was on the debate team, whether I was in mock trial, whatever it was that I chose to do, those are the things that made me successful, and many of those were encompassed in this referendum. So those that are saying that we are not focused enough on education, I would say we are in fact focused on education, and as many times as I have heard Dr. LaSouza speak about what is going on in the future, the world of the future will certainly not be limited to the classroom. It will be filled with the experiences that you are trying to address. You tried to address needs that were focused on STEM. You tried to address needs that were focused on the Performing Arts Center, and you tried to address space challenges. So as you look to the next referendum, whenever that may be, I encourage you not to just look at it as right now within our current space limitations, but continue to think forward about what we may need in the future and to maximize the finances and the facilities that we have available to us, because we are in a challenge and a space-constrained district. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. No, I don't believe so. If you could just introduce yourself and...
Ed Bormakian, Chatham Borough. I would just wanted Mr. Gilfilm to please clarify your opening statement about the referendum. You said that there was no other choice, basically that there's no, you're not in favor of like renovating anything, so that unless there's going to be a new building, there's going to be no referendum for future projects.
In the facilities that we have, okay, it's very difficult to work within the means of them to achieve the goals that we stated in terms of what we were trying to do for the arts program. Right? There's space constraints, there's cost constraints, there's all different kinds of things that led us to go for a new facility versus renovating existing facilities.
So you're saying that hasn't changed then?
What I'm saying is that what we had looked at before was not a solution that worked, so we have to go back now and relook to see whether or not we can devise a solution that works.
And what are you considering as an option?
At this point, we have to go and start anew because of all the things that we looked at didn't work, so now we have to go back and try to see if we can find something that does.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I'd just like to ask, in the matter of trying to save a few minutes for everyone, if anyone is going to public speak, please come up and get online while the person is still speaking so we don't have a downtime waiting for people to come out of their seats and come to the microphone.
Can I just get a show of hands who plans on speaking, at least at the moment? Thank you, Mr. Carr. Thank you. And not that you can't change your mind, I'm just trying to, so the folks can gauge their time.
Hi, I'm Navina Sitharam. I'm from Chatham Township, and I'm on the CHS PTO curriculum committee, as well as a parent volunteer with Chatham STEM. So a few months ago, even almost a year ago, I actually came to the board and I shared with you some information about a science research camp that the community implemented, and which was very successful. We ran it last summer, self-funded. It was at the high school, and we did coordinate this with Mr. Devine, the science supervisor. So that was very successful. I do want to say that based on people's interest, we will be implementing another camp of this type to introduce science research concepts and the idea of hands-on science to our high school students this coming summer. But I did want to briefly say there are a few things that we learned from this, and which was interesting. First and foremost, of course, that the interest is there. We do have students who are interested in looking at science beyond, what they learn in the classroom, and applying it to a research project that they think of themselves and they actually do themselves. So that's the first thing. The other thing we learned was that science research, it's a very academic subject. It's as opposed to more of an extracurricular. It is tied very closely to the curriculum, and in our research and our investigations into this, we actually did meet with other school districts similar to ours, Summit, Milburn, Watching Hills, and so many of these schools have research programs that are part of the curriculum. It's offered as a class, and it supports the science that they're learning in their other science classes. So we actually want to suggest that the school district looks at offering science research as a class at the high school level, similar to what our other high-performing peer schools do. And one other thing I wanted to mention is, I understand that right now the school district is looking to hire 2 teachers, a biology teacher and a physics teacher at the high school level. We suggest, and we actually strongly encourage, that the school district might look at hiring a teacher that has experience in science research, who would be able to implement a science research program at the high school. Since we're doing it anyway, it would make sense to really look at, potentially hiring someone who could bring this to our kids and to our students and offer something that, that our students would benefit from. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hello, Mr. Carr.
Hi, my name is Stuart Carr, 3 Crestwood Drive in Chatham. A couple of scattershot questions. Number one, I heard rumblings about April, November. I assume there's no April, November discussion going on at this point, and if so, if you could let us know about that.
Yes, not at this time, but we'll let you know. We would announce it. We would bring it up in like a board business as a, open discussion amongst the board, and then we wouldn't vote on it that particular, but it would go in, 2 weeks or, at most a month out. So not at this time, but the process would be, it would come up during board business discussion, similar to last time, and then it would go to a vote the following board meeting.
Understood. So there hasn't been any internal discussion, so we only get a month's notice, something like that. Is that correct?
That's correct. There's been no discussions, but that's not to say that you wouldn't get a month's notice. Is a month enough time to prepare?
Well, it took us 6 months to get people's attention for the referendum, so a month may not be enough time.
Okay.
Just want to make sure, again, if you could let us know if you decide to think about going April, November, that the public is aware of it well in advance. That would be appreciated.
I'll try and get it close to a month, but at 6 months, I don't know that we would have...
Whatever it is, you get the idea.
Okay,
You
I
could
get
just
it.
Take a handle on that.
Not Friday. You don't want to see it on a Friday and then it be voted on a Monday.
We're not joking. I'm just, you figured that out. We're not, I just want to know.
You're not joking? I'm sorry. Could you
That's it.
clarify?
What I'm saying is that we take it very seriously to make sure we understand that we stay in April so that the voters can vote on the budget and not allocate to the board, not allocate, but delegate to the board the voting on the budget.
The voting of the, I'm sorry, and you mean the school budget, right?
The school budget, which is now voted on in April by the voters directly, subject to 2% cap, et cetera, about 500 districts have moved the voting on the Board of Education elections to November, at which time now you no longer have the right to directly vote on the budget so long as it does not exceed the 2% cap. Is that correct?
That is correct. As long as it
and we
does
take
not
that seriously. We'd like to have more than a month notice if that's going to be in the offering as a point.
Or they're about a month. Mr.
Yeah,
Capello,
we get the idea. Just come on, just let us know about it is the idea.
Yeah, and for sure.
Appreciate that, Brad.
I'm not going to say we're going to have 6 months lead time on that. Peter, how many districts are still in April?
I believe
About 20
there are 16 districts out of the 560, approximately 560 districts. So 16 districts continue to vote. There are 2 districts in Morris County, Riverdale and Chatham. No districts in our neighboring counties of Union or Somerset have an election vote.
Okay, thank you.
That means we have about 520 sheep and about 20 or so that continue to want to keep their own, 16 that still want to keep their own destiny. That's a good thing then. So again, I would encourage the board to keep that in mind, or at least consider that. And our next comment is to our 2 friends on the end here. Again, I was very disappointed I was not able to vote for the Art Center, but again, with my principle, dull though it may be, I voted no on the referendum. But a good thing is that we're not able to get the turf passed, so I intend to come back and make some arguments about potentially good ideas about grass. I'm glad to hear about we have the boosters paying attention to that. I think if it is well maintained, you can have a terrific field, much like we have at a Chumpike, actually, grass field, and we're able again to maintain the park-like atmosphere in the back, have environmental concerns and space concerns, et cetera, all taken into account, not just strictly the baseball people who want to be out 2 weeks earlier in March. Baseball person, having said that. Final comment is, Mr. Gofel, I'm just curious about the whole pension issue, which again is a very, very big issue. Has that just come up in the last couple of months, or has that been around for a little while? I was just curious about that.
No, there was a independent commission put together by Governor Christie. It's a bipartisan commission that's led by a gentleman named Tom Healy, who is a ex-Goldman Sachs banker who ran their pension business. And they went to this committee and asked for recommendations as to how to look at the pension system as is and see whether or not there is a fix for that. And right now, from the pension system, I believe there is $90 billion in it, and they're spending it at $11 billion a year run rate, and they are not achieving the investment returns that they need. So there isn't a chance that it could be with illiquid, I think 10 years out, whatever the numbers is. And actually, that figure increases every year as the number of retirees move into and start taking their benefits. So right now it's a 25-page report. There's not a lot of details. You know, the recommendation was to increase the amount of money that the employees are going to have to contribute to their health care. I'm not quite sure how that works, because if you look under the stipulations of Chapter 78 in this community already, we are at by the end of next year, we'll be at a 25% plus contribution figure. So I'm not quite sure where they're going to squeeze more dollars out of that. And then it's adjusting the pension contribution, whereas now our employees pay 6.9%, and that's actually moving up towards closer to 7.1%. They're asking that to change to a dual contributory system whereby the employees contribute 4%, and then the district actually matches that figure. The goal is to go from defined benefit plans to actually restructuring the pension system as is to a quasi 401k plan. They would actually come up with a formula. There's no details as to that formula to, in essence, break up the existing pension figure and dole that money out to the existing employees as well as the retirees. What worries me the most is that if you look at it from a perspective of if we as a district have to take on the expenses associated with our retirees' health care benefit program, there's nothing in the commission report that says we are going to get funding associated with that. You know, we're not going to get $100 million out of that pension system that we can take as an investment return to fund retirees' health care benefits. So it may become, in essence, an operating cost to the district. We don't know and don't have the exact figures as to how many retirees we have, because it's 30 years out. We don't have those figures. But you can just take a stab in the dark and say we have 10 retirees a year, and the average life expectancy after retirement age is around 30 years. That's 300 people that we'd be bringing back onto, in essence, our health care payment schedule. We as a district right now, how many employees in the district?
Approximately 400 pension-eligible employees.
We have 400. How many people are we providing health care to? About that number? Okay, so our health care budget this year is $9 million. We have 400 people. So if we have to bring back 300 people back onto our cost schedule, you can imagine what that figure may look like.
Totally understood. Did that report just come out like this week?
No, 2 weeks ago?
It came out with right after the budget address, which was the end of February.
Yeah. It's fully online. It was a bipartisan commission. There's I believe six people on that. But they did come out originally, and that the NGAA said that they were in essence a part of that process and were going to be supportive of it. They've now been backpedaling from that. They took a lot of heat for signing in essence a cooperative agreement or a support agreement. But it seems as though they're pulling back. But the questions I have and what I'm addressing is I just don't see honestly where the expectation of the commission report was that it would be a revenue neutral to the district. And I'm struggling to find ways to make it revenue neutral.
So I guess the question is the timing of this discussion. Why did it end up here? And again, I appreciate the candor and all that now, but it's just curious to me that we had that the week after a referendum when we had this big concern, which again is well founded. But this again has been snowballing for the last couple of years at least. We know about that. It's kind of coming due.
From an essence of fact basis, we had nothing until a month ago. And at that point, we were dealing with the referendum. I actually honestly did not read the report until last week.
Okay.
And you can, there was a lot of public press about it last week as well.
Right.
And
The issue is, they want to complete this by the July timeframe, is one of the things that they had pushed for, and because I do believe that the commission doesn't believe that if they don't do something quick, is that anything will get done. So in essence, from a perspective of what the commission is recommending to the governor, it could be thrust upon us relatively quickly. And I look at it almost the potential of it being an unfunded mandate that we need to consider.
I appreciate the fact that we come out the week after the referendum, but I guess it was just coincidental. But that's a pretty big issue and a pretty big bullet hole, and it's been around for a good long while.
Well,
in the
no,
public.
we all know that the pension issue's been around for a while, but in terms of how the pension issue is going to be addressed, we haven't known for
Well,
very
just
long.
coincidence. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate everybody taking the time on this referendum activity. Thank you.
Anyway, Michael Dean, Chatham Borough. The budget passed essentially 2-1. Is that typical for how budgets passed every year? That kind of margin? Okay.
Usually a third.
Right.
Vote no across the board and 2/3 vote yes.
So, I don't claim to have the answers, and I'm probably saying the obvious. 2/3 of the people supported the budget and the funding of the school, and 2/3 just didn't want to go into their very deep pockets and fund some of this referendum. I would hate to think that everybody's going to jump to conclusion it was the Performing Arts Center that made the referendum fail. Probably was, but and I don't know how you get the research to find out what was beyond this, beyond the Performing Arts Center. But we certainly need to do that, and we certainly need to not wait forever for all the students that are in this system and need STEM and other things that are apparently part of today's society. So the only other thing I'll say at this point in time is there is sometimes a problem when you have a joint district in that you have different communities, the borough and the township. So I live in the borough. I guess I already said that. And it's wonderful if you live in the township to tell me that I don't like change, and I don't want to look at Dunkin' Donuts, and I don't want to look at Lumfield and their lights. And I also don't want to look at an airline hangar in front of terminal, in front of the middle school. The Borough of Chatham gave the former Commerce Bank, now TD Bank, diagonally across the street from this middle school, quite a hard time over the design on their branch. I think they made the wrong choice. They ended up with a bigger branch than they could have had a smaller branch, but whatever. So the people of Chatham, apparently, borough, take their historic district, or what they view as their historic district, very seriously. And finally, there probably are a number of people that would find all these costs a real problem to stick around. But from what people have spoken to me about, yeah, they had the deep pockets, but they actually wanted to stay there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Moving on. Oh, sorry. Does anybody else plan on speaking, just so we can get a gauge on time? Please raise your hand or stand up. Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll take these two speakers, and then we'll move on to the regular agenda, and there's another opportunity at the end for additional public commentary. So last two speakers, we'll move to the regular agenda, and then we'll come back to public commentary.
Nabil Moulin, Chatham Township. Thank you very much for all the work you do for our kids. A quick comment on what Mrs. Sitaram was saying. Actually, there is an AP class that's offered by the College Board. That is a science. There is a research class, so it's an added incentive for our administration to look into that if they want to offer that program. A quick question on item D6 of the reorg, I guess. Is there a chance we can add as a list of the papers, the official newspapers, the online newspapers, because that's what many people consult today, the alternative press, and so I guess that's more a question for you. There's a list of news outlets. Is there a way we can add those others to the list? I don't know how it works.
I will investigate. I don't know if they're recognized by the state as
Okay.
legal
Okay.
notification or suffice for legal notification.
Okay. And in the second part of that same point, there is a question regarding making available an email list for people to subscribe to, so information can be sent to the public. And I think there's a fee of $50 that was assessed. So I understand notification for board meetings would go through that, but will we have some of those reports that the school puts out regularly, and that they are very valuable, but very few people know that they are posted? Is there a way we can extend to the distribution list all those reports that are put out? So that's my comment.
Okay, thank you, Nabil. I appreciate it. Sorry. Thank you. And I'm sorry, Nabil, if I could, I apologize. If you could just clarify the last, you're requesting that we notify people that we posted something on the district? I apologize.
So I think there is a provision on the D6. It's if you look on the document, that you have taken steps to make available a system that sends notifications to the people. I mean, that's the way I read it. Maybe I misread it. On page 9 on the back, on the top, that there is a process for people to, for a given fee, right?
We have a mailing list that
Right.
goes to the listed newspapers and listed people. Information goes to the Chatham Borough Clerk, the Chatham Township Clerk, the Library Clerk, and a whole list of people. It goes to each school and it's posted on
Yeah, but on,
each notice in each board, and it goes to the selected newspapers that the district authorized.
yeah, but on the back of that page, page 9, on the top,
Right?
to any regular, special, or scheduled meetings, to any individual requesting to be placed on a mailing list.
Yeah.
So we can sign up for a mailing list and we would be receiving.
If you bring in a $50 check,
Right.
you can receive
Okay.
a mailed notification every time we have a regular meeting or a special Board of Education meeting.
Okay.
As it stated.
Okay, so that's new, right? That's a new provision that's put in place, or has it been in place always?
It's been in place before, I believe, before I started working in Chatham.
Oh, really? Okay, good.
Thank you for clarifying that.
So,
I apologize.
but my question was, can to that, in that email, can we have reports that the curriculum department puts out and?
It's
Two
a
things.
mail.
Right, this is paper mail, but separate to that, parallel to that, we've been talking about when we update our website, which we're in the process of doing, having a subscription capability so that, and I think the short answer would be yes, so that then when we have, when someone, willingly subscribes to whatever notifications we have via our website, we could then create an avenue to send out the report of the graduates or the testing report or any.
Okay, so this one is not electronic, this is, okay, thank you. Sorry for that.
But that other one may be fee-based also, just because of the nature of the administrative costs.
Sure.
But thank you. Thank you again for clarifying.
First gone. Hi, Libby Hilsenrath, Chatham Borough. I'd like to first, I was going to thank Mr. Belding, but he left for his years of service. So I'd like to congratulate Ms. Ciccarelli and Lotta Kenny and Michelle Clark for their elections. And I appreciate the board's responsiveness to holding the special meetings about the referendum and the budget. I just kind of want to follow on a couple of questions, Ed's in particular, and Mr. Gilfillan's comments about sitting down with the arts community after this, the results of this referendum. I think I'd like a little bit of clarification on that first, but secondly, I'd like to say that I think this election and the turnout that where people who came and spoke at public meetings that you held was really a good indication to me that there's a lot of interest and passion in what you guys do and concern for our school system. So I think that now that this vote is over, it's really a good opportunity for all of us to seize that opportunity and leverage the time and talents and passions and willingness of all the community members to volunteer, to come up with solutions to fixing, whatever, the auditoriums or whatever. Maybe not just, I got the feeling it's just the arts community. I think there's a lot of people here that have a lot to contribute. And to that end, I would say, back in 1998 and 99, the school district actually had a process in place with over 300 volunteers who dedicated their time and efforts working with the school board and the administration under Carol Conger, I believe it was the superintendent at the time. And they came up with many initiatives, and I think that that's something we could engage in again. And I just want to say that I would welcome that, and I would look forward to it, and I think the community as a whole would as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hilsenrath. Moving on to our regular business. Personnel first. Ms. Kenny, do you mind moving personnel just for this meeting? I know we're switching chair people.
Yes, I would like to move action items A1 to A14. I would like to move action items A1 to A14 plus the item on the addendum, which is on the addendum, action item 11.
I'll second the motion.
I just want to mention under A2 that Jeremy Hines is resigning to relocate to North Carolina. And although it's not a retirement, and I don't usually comment on resignations, Mr. Hines has really been a terrific contributor to the district. He also, of course, in addition to teaching at the high school, is our head field hockey coach and has worked with students in a lot of other sports programs. And I'm sure the kids are going to miss him dearly, and I just wanted to wish him the best in his new home.
I have to comment on Anne-Marie DeMasi, the kindergarten teacher who, I was one of these parents working on Wall Street and was complaining at the time to Jack Dimple that my daughter had been in preschool for like 3 years and she was learning colors. And I was very upset about that. And she had Anne-Marie DeMasi. And Mrs. DeMasi used to argue and say, don't worry about it. Right now it's just about having fun and getting them to understand school is fun and to start them believing positive about school. Sure enough, Mrs. DeMasi was correct. My daughter's now a freshman at Haverford, straight 5s on her APs. She did very well. So learning blue and red as a kindergartner and learning to love school, I will always appreciate Mrs. DeMasi she did a lot for my daughter and many, many kids. So wish her well.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cronin. I appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions, additional questions or comments or questions for Ms. Grant on the personnel items or Ms. Kenny? No? Going once? Twice? Very good. Mr. DeQuilla, if you would.
Agenda items A1 through 14, including the addendum on A11. Mr. Gilfillan? Yes. Ms. Ciccarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cronin?
Yes.
Mr. Franz?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Nonamaker?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 9-0.
Thank you very much. Moving on to finance and facilities, Mr. Gilfillan?
Just like to move action items D1 through 13 on your regular agenda.
I'll second the motion.
One, on the agenda, Rich, is the donation from the boosters for the soccer clinics as well as the boys and girls lacrosse videos. A second, a thank you to the middle school PTO for donating the money for the 8th grade children to go down to Washington, D.C. this year. And last but not least, the acceptance from the Fidelity Charitable Grant Fund in the amount of $500 to be used in the Eleanor Schickler Award.
I should. That's probably one of the awards that's given out May 29th at the senior ceremony, which I'm looking forward to attending. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Gilfillan or Mr. DeQuilla? Seeing none, Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind?
Agenda items B1 through B13. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Ms. Chigarelli? Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cronin?
Yes.
Mr. Franz?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Nonamaker?
Yes.
And Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items pass 9-0.
Thank you. Ms. Kenny, if you don't mind, also moving,
Yes.
you were chair of curriculum last week, right?
I-
Oh, no,
I-
Ms. Cronin, I'm sorry, Kim, I'm all twisted up.
Okay, you want me to move items C1 through 3?
Yes, please.
I'll second the motion. Yes, I got to officially open the day was.
That's good news.
I'm happy about that, but I got to move back to the C3 at my last job as curriculum chair. All right.
We're running a field trip to the cemetery?
Yeah.
It's actually fun.
Awesome.
I saw that, yeah.
There's the,
It's for the fourth grade, right?
yeah, the Historical Society does a great tour up in that
I'm
area,
more
but
concerned about the mini golf. It will be fun.
it's Monster.
I get it. I know.
It's like kindergarten?
Okay, learning occurs outside the classroom. All right, very good. Does anybody else have any additional questions or comments? Mr. DeQuilla, if you wouldn't mind.
Agenda items C1 to C3, which includes the district closing on Friday, May 22nd. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Ms. Chicarelli?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Connors?
Yes.
Ms. Cronin?
Yes.
Mr. Franz?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Nonamaker?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
Yes, thank you.
Agenda items pass 9-0.
Policy, there are no items. Mr. Belding was the chair of policy in addition to his other duties, so I'll just say that there are none to report on this time. Mr. Franz will be taking over as the chair for the policy committee. Moving on to board business.
I just have one thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just one thing, so the board is aware. On May the 8th, through the Cougar Lacrosse Club, the students in Chatham's 8th grade are going to be dismissed a little bit early from school that day in order for them to manage a clinic for the children of the ECLC. We are providing the clinic, we're providing shirts, we're providing sticks and balls for the kids, and it will be managed and run by all the, I think it's 85 students in the 8th grade in Chatham who participate in the lacrosse program. Mike, I just do need to follow up with you in terms of the documents for the children to be released early.
Yeah, I think
we have put in place from the police and everybody else the process to get the kids up there. I think it's going to be a great day. We hope it to be an annual event for the students of Chatham. I think it's a great way for us to integrate our great students and giving back to kids in need. So I'd like to thank the administration for allowing this to happen. I look forward to be phenomenally successful. We did put a committee together, and it is being handled from a logistics perspective. It should be no issue at all, in my opinion. And anyone who'd like to come and volunteer, please do. It's on May the 8th at about 2 o'clock.
I think the technicality is just that the parents are the ones signing their students out of school. So it's not like we're canceling school early for students. The parents are the ones who are signing the kids out.
Someone will be missing.
And then, Ms. Weber, if I could just add, I did have in all board members' folders 3 different calendars. Calendar 3 is just simply next year's calendar as approved, and the only reason it's there is to really determine whether or not this is calendar 3 that's in your folders. It's an approved calendar for next year. The question really has just kind of arisen as to whether or not the board would like to possibly change the date of spring break next year. The reason being that the park window that had not been announced when we adopted this calendar a year ago has been released, and the park calendar encompasses spring break as well as both weeks of AP testing. So there are kind of three options there. The first is for us to change the calendar. The second is to not do that and just deal with it and get it done. And the third is that we can apply to the state for for flexibility in the testing window. So other districts have moved their testing windows and have gotten approval. The state's been very flexible. So it's just something to put on your radar screen as you look at the calendars. The other two calendars would be the 16-17 calendars, possible ones. And so I was hoping you would just look them over. If you see a better way to do either one of them or both of them, you can let me know, and then we can have sort of a fuller discussion after you've had a week to digest them at the next board meeting, and hopefully we would approve a calendar by June or during June.
And on the 15-16 calendar, moving the spring break, and I don't necessarily need an answer right now, but how disruptive would that be I'm more concerned with staff that may have planned vacations years in advance, and the parents generally start making plans about a year in advance, so it may not impact them as much, but if a staff member, plans a wedding or, how disruptive would that be if we shifted it 2 weeks?
I'd have to check.
Okay.
When we've run into trouble, unfortunately, during spring break for past couple of years, and it was pretty disruptive, but in those instances, we really weren't able to. We didn't confirm we were going to start peeling days away from spring break until January because there were snow issues.
Right.
And at that time, 2 months lead time, it was very disruptive. And last year, we didn't have enough substitutes to cover all the absences that we had.
With a year and a few months lead time, though, it would certainly be different. And also, just lost my train of thought. How arduous is the request to move the testing timeframe? I know Park is brand new, but you said other schools have requested and they were received. Is it an arduous process?
Whenever we needed to move NJ Ask or ask for some kind of flexibility, it was not arduous at all. And I just read the memo from a couple of weeks ago. It sounded like they were more than willing to move test windows around, but we can engage them and find out for certain what we can do.
Could you go down both paths, seeing about moving it, and then also spot checking some of the staff on disruptiveness, if we did in fact have to move?
Yep.
Mr. Connors?
Yeah, just Mike, following up on Bill's comments about the request, what's the timeline for when the request is made as to when we could expect a response from Trenton?
Well, I just actually made a request to change our end of course biology test for the high school, and I received a response within 4 days. That's for this year.
Okay, I'm just assuming there's going to be a different timeline for Park because that's a bigger gig.
Yeah, yes, but we've modified that before. We've
Okay.
modified testing. It's usually a quick turnaround. It's just
So within a week or so?
Exactly.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Do any other board members have any items they'd like to bring up at this time? If you could take a look at the calendars that Dr. LaSousa put in there, both the 15-16, moving the spring break, if you can, take a temperature. And I know we've done surveys in the past on various things. Is there a possibility to send a survey out either through the school or the PTOs to see how disruptive?
Yes, I should have mentioned
I'd like
that.
to move the test as far away from AP testing as possible, just for the kids. I mean, forget about spring break, but if we can maybe poll the parents in those testing grades to see how disruptive moving spring break would be, if that would be optimal for the students.
Sure, I can look into that. My hope with the other two calendars was that if anyone has a good suggestion to modify either one, and then we're left with 3 calendars, for example, those we would circulate through the PTOs.
Right, and those are 2 years out.
feedback.
I'm asking if we move, the same question, if we look to move the spring break.
I can look at that.
Yeah, but if we move spring break, doesn't the testing still take place the last week of April and the first 2 weeks of May? So it still affects AP testing.
Yes, other than having a break and then right back in. If we move the break further away, that at least be back in school for reviews.
Right.
But right before AP testing. I'm more concerned with AP testing.
Yeah, for sure.
Quite honestly.
I would agree. Okay.
Do the testing before the break?
That's what we would do under the current situation, but then we'd have to test the week before break, and then when we come back, it's AP time. So in other words, it's sort of like 2 weeks of a break from 2 weeks where AP courses are being sort of suspended, from regular instruction, or at least some AP courses potentially.
Right, we want to minimize that.
I hear you.
So could you go down both paths and
Will do.
and make a recommendation? Thank you. So again, if you could look at the calendars, so the administration is going to go down and look at about the park testing, the AP testing, and moving spring break. And if the board could look at the 16-17 and possibly propose what would be a third calendar if you see some opportunities to improve the calendar. Any other comments from the board? Questions at this time? Additional new items? No, at this time. Very good. Thank you. Then this is our opportunity, second opportunity for public commentary. Again, I apologize. We only have one mic that records out over the system, so if you would just step up to this side. And again, show of hands, is there a lot of people that haven't spoken? No offense, Ms. Devlin. Are there a lot of folks that haven't spoken yet that plan on speaking? Again, I don't want to cut you off, Jane. I just want to give okay, very good. Thank you, sir. We'd like to get the folks that haven't had an opportunity to speak first. And Nabil and Ms. Devlin are veterans, so they understand the process. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, that'd be...
Yes, I'm Norman Schaefer from the borough. I have a commentary to make on the election we just had. If you're going to have the people vote, they should know exactly what they're voting on. Question number 2 was a bundle. And I personally asked 5 different people, do you understand what you just read on the bottom part of that ballot? Did you know you were voting on a new building and maintenance involved with it? Not one of them said yes. They said, no, I don't understand what they're talking about in that question number 2. It was a legal masterpiece of obfuscation. If you want to put it in legal terms like that, then have an explanatory statement with it that people can understand. If you want to further your cause and what you think we need, please tell us in plain everyday terms, and if it has multiple facets, give us each facet so that we can vote on that. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schaefer. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Yes, Nabil Moulin, Chatham Township. I would like to get back on the question of the strategic planning. I'm one of those members in the community that's been calling and advocating for that. And I would like to submit to you, it's because we have many competing demands, things that are happening to us, like mandates or pension reform or next generation science standards, which we need to adjust, maybe more resources there or not. The teacher contract and those things coming up. And some things that we can choose as a community to invest in, from the full day kindergarten, the art programs, the class size, if we want to reduce that or not. It is because there are so many things we need to deal with, and because we have limited resources. That is the reason why we need a strategic plan. A strategic plan is not a laundry list of wish things from different members in the community. So I would like to invite you to reconsider getting some process, call it whatever you want, but that lists all those competing demands and brings the community around the table to discuss them. Bringing the community around the table does not make you forego the final call. You are the people who have elected, and you're going to be making the decision. And the administration will be executing that plan. But please don't go back into private meetings and make decisions and then come back to us 6 months later. And it is all well intended, but I think the message from the community is that get us involved. If I am one of the arts people, I would like programs that will cater to everybody in the community. It's not because my kids are not on the play that I should not be listened to. And don't listen to me because I do more STEM things. We need to listen to everybody else. So please come up with some process that will bring the community around the table. That let us discuss, and that's not a 1 meeting or 2 meeting. Everybody around us that puts in place something like that, it takes 4, 5, 6 months. And yes, it's work. Sometimes you need to get the help of some consultant that's going to facilitate the process. But that's how, in my perspective, communities come together around the project, and then the final call remains to the board, to the people we elect. but don't put the discussion as a private discussion outside of the public eye, and then come up with the suggestions, because we're going to end up with the same things. So that's my request to you. Please reconsider the use of something like a strategic planning tool to allow the community to come with those suggestions, and then for you to make the final call. Thank you.
Thank you, Nabil.
Jane Devlin, Chatham Township. I don't think planning is done behind closed doors. I think frameworks are developed, and then you do bring it forth to us as a community for discussion, for analysts, etc. So I view it a little different than the gentleman before me, Nabil, that spoke. But I came up now to ask about the last person that spoke in the first round, Libby. I think Libby. She had mentioned in 1998 there were 300 or so volunteers that were kind of on board. That's been a while ago, over 15 years, but I wonder if Dr. LaSousa or anyone could explain that a little bit, let us know how that worked out. What about all that? I just wanted a little bit more understanding and clarification on the point she brought up. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Devlin. I can't speak for
15 years is right before my time, but I think that Carol Conger had a strategic planning committee that she worked with. I think there were, and again, this is all kind of secondhand for me, subcommittees of groups that worked on, specific areas or issues. And I imagine that's how, and there was also communications kind of element to that. So I think that's how she drew in a number, a whole lot of volunteers.
I'll be brief. As a second time. As someone who stood before this board and has listened. Hi, I'm Amanda Feeman, and I live in the township, and I'll actually start by clarifying my other comments for people who are watching on tape. Though I do live in the township, I lived in the borough for 8 years, and I live on Shunpike Road. So when I talk about changes to the community, I'm not removed from what's going on downtown. I'm actually districted to Washington Avenue School and very involved. But what brings me to stand here is something that I actually found somewhat disturbing as part of the referendum, and I hear it going on in this room. As someone who stood in this room for 2 years advocating for full-day kindergarten, and starting with Mr. Belding, who didn't necessarily agree with us, I think one of the distinctions that I keep hearing coming at you as a board is that people are saying they're not being heard. And I think that there is a big difference in being heard and expecting people to agree. So this board has held many opportunities for those of us to bring ideas before you, to voice our public comments. And though you don't necessarily do everything that we ask you to do, I think that you are hearing people, and you're giving people an opportunity to voice their opinions. So as we go forth towards a referendum, and to many in this room, I felt it as part of going through this referendum, we are part of one town, and being heard is not the same as everyone agreeing. And just because you were a board and didn't make recommendations that did everything that some of us asked, I don't think that means you did not listen. I think that meant that you took different things into account and different interests, and you did what was best in the interest. And so I ask that we keep that in mind as we go forward, that we hear each other and we be respectful of what each other has to say as we work as a community towards next steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We're going to close. I'm sorry, Dr. LaSousa, we do not have an executive session, correct? Excellent. So thank you, everybody, again, for coming out. I know we lost a few folks around the... I make a motion to close the public meeting. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Everybody's running? Thank you again, everybody. Please drive safely.